Murray. He's here with his wife, Sarah, and their two youngest children, Grace and Henry. As I said during my convocation speech last week, we're extraordinarily fortunate to have Mr. Murray and his family join this community, and to have Mr. Murray become the next leader of Lawrenceville. He's a person of enormous integrity, intelligence, conviction, and compassion, who I know will fit right into Lawrenceville and continue to help us all learn and grow and to be our best. Joining us this afternoon is one of the co-chairs of the search committee, Whitney Brown, from the class of 1991. Ms. Brown came to Lawrenceville from Lake Forest, Illinois in the fall of 1988, the second year after we went co-ed. She has made her mark here as a student, an athlete, an alumni volunteer, and for the past 8 years as an invaluable member of the Board of Trustees and a cherished friend and advisor to me. Ms. Brown and the other members of the search committee, including Ms. O'Malley, made a Herculean effort this past spring and summer. First, to reach out to the school community to find out what you all most valued about Lawrenceville and hope for in the next headmaster. Then, to recruit an outstanding pool of candidates. And finally, to select an experienced school leader and a truly first-rate human being, Mr. Murray. Please join me in thanking Ms. Brown, Ms. O'Malley, and the entire search committee for their tireless efforts, and in congratulating them on their great success, and in welcoming Ms. Brown to the stage to formally introduce Mr. Murray.
So much for that introduction. I would first like to thank you, Ms. Duffy, for making the job of the search committee so much easier. Your leadership over the past 12 years has catapulted Lawrenceville to a leadership position in so many realms. With our school in this enviable spot, we were able to attract an incredible pool of talent eager to build on your legacy. I personally look forward to Lawrenceville celebrating Headmaster Duffy's accomplishments in the months ahead. I also have to tell you, I could not be happier to be here today. I know I speak for the entire search committee when I say how honored we were to be asked to select our next leader. We led an exhaustive process where we sought thoughts and opinions of students, faculty, staff, parents, alumni, and trustees about what was important to them about Lawrenceville and about what kind of leader would serve Lawrenceville best next. There was a resounding consensus about finding an innovative educator who loved the residential life unique to boarding schools like ours, someone who connected with all of Lawrenceville's constituents in a deeply personal way, someone who loved Harkness learning and our house system, someone who inspired and empowered our world-class faculty, someone who could manage the complexity of our school, someone who wanted to spend time cheering on our students out on the sports field and in the art studio, someone who truly understood what makes Lawrenceville the incredibly special place that it is. A tall order indeed. But when we met and got to know Steve Murray, we knew we had found what we had been searching for, and so much more. Mr. Murray is a self-described boarding school junkie. He is a graduate of Exeter and spent 15 years at Deerfield, where he served as assistant headmaster, dean of students, and also coached water polo, served as a dorm head, and taught French. For the past decade, Mr. Murray has been the headmaster of the University School in Cleveland, Ohio, an all-boys school with 875 students and 2 campuses. Among a long list of accomplishments, Mr. Murray has introduced Harkness teaching there, and even had some students build Harkness tables from the trees in the old growth forest on campus. As you all get to know Mr. Murray, it will be clear that he is a definition of a responsible leader. He leads with integrity and is a man of great warmth, intellect, and humor. It will also be clear how fortunate we are that he will be our next headmaster. We are also very lucky that with Mr. Murray, Lawrenceville gets to welcome the Murray family to campus. Mrs. Murray is Mr. Murray's partner in every sense of the word. She is one of 9 children and also attended Exeter, where she and Mr. Murray were best friends even back then. We also want to welcome 2 of their 5 children. 2 of their 5 children, Grace and Henry, who are here today. Grace is a junior at the Lawrenceville School and will be spending this winter and spring at the High Mountain School Academy in Colorado. Next fall, I'm sure she will be able to tell you some incredible tales of summiting 14,000 feet peaks. Henry is 11 and attends the university school. If you get the chance to see him on campus later, be sure to ask him about shooting hoops with LeBron James in his own backyard. It's a true story. The Murrays also have a son, James, who is 19 and spent a semester tagging deep water sharks at the island school, a daughter, Maggie, who is 21 and lives in New York City, where she provides career counseling to welfare recipients, trying to get them back to work, and his son, Sam, who at 24 is the middle school division head at the McClellan School in Pueblo, Colorado. I know you all will join me in welcoming the Murrays to Lawrenceville, and especially Mr. Murray, the 13th headmaster of the Lawrenceville School.
Thank you, Ms. Brown, and thank you, Ms. Duffy. I'd like to meet that guy you described. He sounds kind of interesting. Good afternoon. I cannot tell you how pleased I am to be here, how lucky I feel, and how eager I am to meet all of you. I can only learn so much about you on YouTube. For example, it's a bit random, but I caught the 2013 video depicting Stanley House's win in House Olympics. I saw a faculty group do a cover version of a Miley Cyrus tune. I learned more than I knew there was to know about the crutch game, which I loved. I heard a choral group perform a beautiful rendition of If Music Be the Food of Life. Lovely. I saw a clip of a 2012 Lawrenceville Hill boys lacrosse game. Looked as if Hill was getting schooled. I saw a girls basketball video, We Have the Heart, which looked wonderful. So I've gotten some tantalizing glimpses of all of you, but it's nice to finally be here and to start the process of meeting all of you. And even just in 24 hours, there's a lot you can pick up on. I can tell, just from walking around, what a happy place this is, and even just getting a sense of the buzz of all of you walking into you. I know you're only 2 weeks into the school year, and a number of you are new, but the buzz that I feel just walking in tells me a lot about you. So, our time is brief, and many of you have athletic practices and other things to go to, so I'll just do 2 things, I thought. One, to share a thought or two on why I'm so thrilled to come to Lawrenceville, and secondly, to help you get a start to have a sense of what I feel is important, and I'll do that by telling 2 brief stories, one fictional and one true. So to begin, there are many reasons why I feel so lucky, so fortunate, so honored to have this opportunity. Many of them are obvious. Lawrenceville is one of the truly great schools. It's a national caliber institution, not a world-class institution. I've known this since I was a kid growing up in Morristown, New Jersey. You have a remarkable faculty, among the very best in the country, and an extraordinary student body. And I really mean that. Many of you have already taken the time to come up to me, to introduce yourselves, to say hello, to offer directions, to just stick out your hand and make me feel greeted and welcomed in the most wonderful way, and I appreciate that. And then for me, a return to a boarding environment is a return to an environment that I love. I've really missed the 24/7 experience that I had when I was at Deerfield. I love the coaching, teaching, residential life. I love coming to games, and you can expect to see me at the sidelines of as many as I possibly can make. I look forward to swinging through the houses in the evenings and seeing you where you come home to roost at the end of the day. I was known in my previous life at Deerfield for always having a big bag of peanut M&Ms when I was on duty at Deerfield, so I'll have to figure out what my signature snack will be when I come around next year. And my wife, Sarah, and I hope that you will all feel welcome at different times to come see us at Foundation House. I love how the house is situated and set up to allow that to happen. And we're working on a number of ideas to draw you in. So we're truly looking forward to that. And perhaps as important as any consideration, I love the fact that we have an opportunity here to construct a community. We have an opportunity to build an intentionally broad and diverse environment where we can bring a range of people and perspectives together, where we can work at bridging differences, understanding each other, because there's no better and no more important way to prepare you to navigate the world today. On a good day, the world is full of bewildering differences. Just look at the range of issues we're currently grappling with. There's serious racial tension in Ferguson, Missouri. The US Congress appears to have forgotten how to model collaborative government. Russia has occupied the Crimea and continues to pressure the territorial integrity of Ukraine. The ceasefire in the Gaza Strip remains fragile. For all intents and purposes, we are collaborating with Iran and Syria to confront the extraordinary and brutal rise of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And we have a serious outbreak of Ebola in Liberia. And that's just to name a few. It's simply not an option to think that we can construct an artificial bubble in which we will only encounter the familiar and never be asked to understand a different perspective. I'm not overstating when I say that we have a unique opportunity here. The Harkness table, for example, is a powerful element. Just as you are taught not just to listen to your peers, but to hear them. Just as no voice should be marginalized around that table, no voice should be marginalized or disrespected on this campus. It isn't always like this in the world, but we have a chance to practice this level of respect and to see for ourselves that it works. And in fact, respect may be the only thing that can work. I'll share a minor personal story, so minor as to be almost trivial, except that it had an effect on me. When I headed off to Exeter at age 16, a public school kid from Morristown, New Jersey, my mother took me to our local department store to buy me a tweed jacket. I asked her why. I said I had my blue blazer that I wear to church. I'd never owned two jackets before, and I didn't think I needed it. And she explained that I had to wear a jacket to class every day, so I needed one, and that's what kids did at Exeter. So I thought, well, I better get with the program, and after trying it on, I thought my first tweed jacket was kind of sharp. So I show up, I'm a new junior, that's to say a 11th grader, and I was at my very first lunch on my very first day, and I boldly joined a table of people I didn't know. I didn't know anybody, so any table would have to do. And 5 minutes into the meal, a girl next to me leaned over and pulled open my jacket to see the label, and she said, "Oh, it's not a Harris tweed." Now, I didn't know what a Harris tweed was, but I knew I wasn't wearing the right kind of coat, and somehow I had been dissed. And the reason I tell you this is not because it was profoundly upsetting and I managed to roll with her minor offhand slight, but I reflected back on that moment because here I am, a white kid from a reasonably affluent family. I'm an athlete. I'm fairly confident in my abilities and my sense of belonging. And it took nothing to exclude me and to let me know that, in fact, I did not fully belong to the inner circle. And that really is my point, that it can happen so easily. And even if it's inadvertent and no one has ill intent, how much more easily for someone entering a community who might harbor deeper misgivings and deeper questions of whether or not he or she belongs. And so that's the point I'm trying to make. We have the privilege and the opportunity to work at these kinds of questions together, to be an intentional community, not a perfect community. We'll get it wrong sometimes, but a community where honesty and open dialogue help us to come together and work in a purposeful way at being the best community we can be. And so for all these reasons, I'm deeply, deeply excited to come. Now just a brief reflection of what I feel is important. Of the many ways to live a good and worthwhile life, one of them is to have the patience, courage, and optimism to try to make a difference, to have an understanding that little things matter. One of the great stories in French literature is a tale by Jean Giono, written in 1953 called The Man Who Planted Trees. As a young man, the narrator is traveling on foot to a remote area of northern Provence in the barren and desolate foothills of the Alps. The area is by nature quite dry and remote, but it had become especially desolate over time. Deforestation and human neglect caused it to decline. Soil deteriorated, springs dried up, and many villages were abandoned. What few people remained were poor materially and poor in spirit, reduced to scrounging and competing for the local meager resources. He eventually meets, in the midst of this windy and lonely landscape, a shepherd of indeterminate age who is living on his own, having lost his wife and only son. The narrator lingers for a day and a night and discovers as he accompanies this man out into the hills to tend to sheep, that in addition to tending his flock, he carefully plants oak trees. Each night, he selects 100 perfect acorns from the sack he's gathered, and then over the course of the day, using an iron rod to dig a tiny hole, he plants his trees, 100 a day. Many don't sprout, he explains, and many succumb to the elements, but a certain number eventually grow. Giono writes of the shepherd, "It was his opinion that this land was dying for want of trees." He added that having no pressing business of his own, he had resolved to remedy this state of affairs. And so, 100 acorns at a time, this simple man sets out to make a difference, to set something right. Over the course of the story, the young man gets pulled into the affairs of the world, serves in the trenches of World War I, and has many other experiences, but periodically finds reasons to go back into the hills to check on the progress of this shepherd. The narrator is struck by a certain quiet, passionate determination, even in the face of failure. The author writes, "You can easily imagine that for such an accomplishment, it was necessary to conquer adversity, that to assure the victory of such a passion, it was necessary to fight against despair. One year he had planted 10,000 maples. They all died." On each subsequent visit, the shepherd is peacefully continuing his work, blissfully unaware of the human events in which the narrator is caught up. At first, the impact of the trees is hardly perceptible, but ultimately, over several decades, the impact of the maturing trees is considerable. The stands of oak, and he eventually adds beech and birch trees, break the unrelenting wind, hold water in the soil, bring back animals and birds, allow for wild raspberries and grasses to grow, and finally humans return. They resurrect villages, farm the land, and the landscape is utterly transformed. The narrator finishes with this final passage of the book. "When I think that one man, armed with only his own physical and moral resources, was able to cause this land of Canaan to spring from the wasteland, I am convinced that in spite of everything, humanity is admirable. But when I take into account the persistence, the depth of heart, and the selfless dedication that was needed to bring about this transformation, I am filled with an immense respect for the simple old peasant who produced a work worthy of God." It's a nice story, but of course, a story, a bit of folklore. We can contrive stories that make us feel good, but in fact you have to wonder, are there real examples around us of this type of simple faith in human spirit? Well, perhaps. There's a story that my good friend Dorothy Burford passed on to me. Dorothy was a custodian at University School for many years. She worked in my office, and when I first arrived at the school, she was my first friend, first person who truly made me feel welcome, and she became a bit of a confidant for me. She passed an article on to me from the Plain Dealer about a guy known as Joe Brick. His real name is George Thomas, and he's a real guy working in his own quiet way, making a tiny difference in his own little corner of Cleveland. The parallel is not perfect, but the simplicity and humility of the individual caused me to think of Giono's character. Joe Brick devotes his time to the exceptionally tedious task of cleaning concrete off discarded brick from old buildings so that the brick can be used again. It's helpful for restoration projects where certain brick must be matched, and it also is an important act of recycling. The author of the article writes, "Thomas says he's been working since he was a 12-year-old, washing out empty pop bottles for change, and isn't about to quit yet. For his career, he worked in various jobs around Cleveland, and then finally went to retire, but he got bored with his empty existence, and so began to work cleaning bricks. He says he can get 7 to 15 cents for each finished brick, and he can clean more than 1,000 on a good day. To help ease his work, he says, I got my radio, and I got my Indians. They seem to be winning, so I seem to be listening. And he takes tremendous pride in what he does. I'm happy I can make something out of something that would be just a waste to throw away, something that someone can use again. My life is simple. It ain't hard. I'm blessed. One way or another, everything takes care of itself. If you think of the peasant who planted trees and of Joe Brick, one item they have in common is that they've been given few advantages in life, and in fact, each in his own context occupies the humblest position in society. And yet, with great energy, optimism, and faith, each sets out to spend his days usefully, to engage patiently and persistently in a task that will not bring any fame or fortune, and most likely will not result in any personal notice at all. In fact, it is the utter simplicity and selflessness of their work that I find so admirable. To those to whom much is given, much will be asked. I've certainly heard that line before, but if Elzéar Bouffier, our peasant, and George Thomas can quietly work away trying to contribute something and feel lucky to have the chance to contribute something, imagine what those who've been given real advantages might be called upon to do. So that is the message I would like to leave with you. As you move on, as you manage your friendships, as you eventually decide what you love and what you want to do with your lives, remember the power and importance of simple, selfless gestures that seek to make a difference. Remember that sometimes the most worthy individuals, those most deserving of our respect, are those engaged in the simplest tasks. Even more importantly, if you can emulate an element of their selflessness, of their devotion to making tiny incremental changes in the world, if you can live with their lack of entitlement, their sense of optimism and purpose, then certainly you'll be well on the way to living a good and worthy life. Thank you very much.